I mean, you might even just have to hold it a little bit. But are we good?
It's really sunny now.
Aditya? I guess we just won't move it much.
No,
unless you...
I'm not going to breathe even.
No.
Or
Aditya?
there's...
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. You had it muted.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, Prabhu. I was talking and I was like, why isn't Prabhu replying? So.
Are we good?
We're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I will get started. Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you for bearing with our technical difficulties. I will just start from the top. My name is Raseshwar Madhava, and we've been doing a series of discussions mainly targeted for the younger generation of those practicing bhakti, and really for anyone who is interested in spirituality, looking to connect with the teachings of yoga. We are specifically going to be speaking from the text from the Bhagavad Gita and the ancient Eastern wisdom. Just a little bit about myself before we get started. Day to day, I'm practicing as a pediatrician. And right now, as you notice a background, we're not at ISKCON Toronto as we've normally been in the past. I'm actually working in Timmins at the moment as the pediatrician on call. So this is actually the beautiful home I'm staying in, and this is the backyard. So this is where I am now, and the luxury of the internet and Facebook is that you can take it and set it up wherever you want. So I've had the good fortune of living in many places around the world, specifically London, New York, St. John's, Newfoundland, Ottawa, also in Grenada. And for me, I've had a chance to really take the teachings of Bhakti and try as best as possible to apply it in my day-to-day life. And so this is really an opportunity for me to share some of the experience that I've had, and also for us to have open discussions in a way that we can all learn and grow together. So I've had a lot of help from and support from my mentors, so I really feel grateful and also obliged and inspired to share what I've been given to with all of you. So thank you so much for being here and tuning in. And we're going to be welcoming questions at a certain point. Right now, currently working in outside of working in Toronto, my main services are usually around. I spend a lot of time developing myself, reading and studying, but also we have a project called Kirtan Toronto, which I'm actively involved in, and we're really trying to reach out to a broader audience of people to bring Kirtan yoga to, and especially the culture of bhakti. So my sincere hope is that we can take some of these teachings of what we discussed today and apply it in our life. And really, I would genuinely want all of us to appreciate the knowledge that Srila Prabhupada has left for us in his book. So we will be looking at a little bit of what we're discussing today in the Bhagavad Gita. So the topic today, as mentioned, was getting to know our own strengths and our own personality, specifically so we can be empowered to achieve greater goals in life. Now, the Vedic texts, they talk about our inherent natures or identities, and the term they use is Varna. Many people know the term Varna Dharma, more commonly in India known as the caste system. Now, the reason why we felt that this topic is so important to discuss and why I would like to talk about this more is because this actually, knowing ourselves better and knowing others better, it actually gives us a whole different lens by which we can actually look at how the world functions. It gives us a completely accurate picture of how things work around us. And what this allows us to do is when we understand ourselves better, we're actually then able to go out into the world and make more informed decisions for ourselves, but also decisions that are going to help us to be more successful. Specifically, Varna, once we know our Varna, we're actually able to align our nature and our inherent qualities and strengths to be able to choose a career that's going to be most conducive. So I definitely I'm hoping if for those people that are tuning in, if they haven't chosen a career, that they'll learn something today that'll help them know themselves to better make that choice. Or otherwise, if you're in a career and are looking to maybe shift, you can maybe gain some information about yourself to hopefully better transition and make that shift. The other goal that I'd like to have for today is that when we understand our Varna better, we actually have improved relationships, not only with friends and family, but those that we work with. And ultimately, when we have improved relationships and know ourselves, we're living in this world with greater confidence and resiliency. So just going through again, like just different reasons. Again, you may have, if there's, I want people to reflect on perhaps something that they'd like to take out of today's session. And if you can, just take a moment to write it down about something that you'd like to learn. Maybe you had a question before coming in. We'd be open to questions, because knowing our Varna, or specifically our nature, it's really about us living more honest and sincere lives and having a more honest approach to life, because so many times we are confused and we're not sure about what we should be doing day to day, because a lot of times there's pressures from so many different factors that we're actually trying to be someone we're not. And maybe that feeling has resonated with somebody out there at some point, where they're being pushed to do something that they actually may not like to do, and they actually aren't very good at. So our hope today is that when we have a better sense of our identities and our strengths, is that we're going to be making choices of ourselves that are going to put us in positions where we're choosing things that we like to do, and ultimately things that we're really good at. So before we get started, we're just going to do a quick, we're going to do invocation. And invocation really is for the purpose of invoking auspiciousness and blessings before we get further into this discussion. So we'll go ahead and start. Om Agyanti Mirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chaksu Ulmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadanti Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuda Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Si Rupam Sagarajataham Sahagana Rugnat Anvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padahan Sahagana Lalitam Shri Vishakanvitam Shah He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchna Gaurangi Vrade Vrindaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpa Turbhyascha Kripa Sundai Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So again, thank you very much for tuning in. Before we get started, as always, I'd like to seek blessings from all those that have tuned in from any part of Canada or around the world, that we can share something today that is beneficial for everyone that's tuned in, and also something that can please our teachers and my spiritual master that has given me so much. So on that note, what I'm going to start by doing, what we'll start by doing is we're going to describe the four varnas, or essentially natures, and then what we'll do after that is we're going to try to get in to really apply this and learn and figure out how we can apply this to ourselves. I'm going to be asking some questions, so it'd be helpful to everyone if they had some sort of piece of paper to write on, because you will be writing down some questions that you'll be giving some thought to. Now, we may not get to for you to think about all the questions. These will be some questions that you'll take away, but hopefully in what we speak about and some reflection on what you'll hopefully think about yourself will generate some questions and discussion and go from there. So as I mentioned, the Varna system in the Vedic texts, in the ancient texts of yoga, is known as the social divisions of society. And more easily way to relate to it for our day-to-day life is it correlates with our field of work. Now, one of the first principles of Varna Dharma is actually knowing our nature, or knowing our identity, and then actually trying to match our identity with the activity that we do, or specifically our career. So that when there is this harmony, that we actually have a sense of fulfillment, confidence, but then it also calms our mind down so we can actually ultimately explore the higher purposes of our existence, which is specifically to cultivate our relationship with the divine or the supreme, specifically with God. In the Bhakti text, we understand God to be named as Krishna, the one who is all attractive. So the unfortunate part about the Varna system, or what's commonly known as the caste system, is that in modern day, especially in India where it's most well known, is that it's been very misunderstood. I'm sure many people can say when they hear the word caste system, it has a negative connotation. And the reason why that is because it's actually been taken out of its context and it's been misused. It was never meant for discrimination, to discriminate upon others. It was never meant for perpetuating one's power. It was actually specifically meant for authentic self-expression. That's actually what it was meant for, is that when we understand that we all have unique roles in society, and that once we know our roles, and once we know that other people have their unique roles and offerings and gifts, that we actually all work together in harmony. So the Varna Dharma is specifically, there's 4 Varnas, and then there's 4 ashrams. And so the Varna ashram system, the ashram consists specifically our progressive spiritual stages, and there's 4 of those as well. We won't be getting into talking about those 4 things today. We're specifically going to be addressing our identities through the Varna system. And I can say for myself, I've been really fortunate that I've been given activities that have really nurtured and cultivated my Varna, and hopefully through some few tidbits about myself, you'll maybe, as we go through it, you'll maybe understand what my Varna is. So it's a really great area to explore, and I really hope that we're going to be able to take a lot out of this. That's really practical, actually. So the first, we'll essentially first talk about the 4 different types of Varnas. And so while there is a hierarchy, the hierarchy is really there in a specific context, and we'll get into that. The first Varna, or the first inherent nature that exists, is the Brahmanas. And so the Brahmanas are those that are actually considered the intellectual class of society. So they are the intelligent class, they're the thinkers, they're the teachers, they're the ones they're the spiritual leaders, and specifically their role in society is to impart knowledge, They provide structure and ideas by which society should govern itself. And ideally, the Brahmanas they're always guided by spiritual principles. Now, if we take specifically the Bhagavad Gita, I would like everyone to flip to chapter 18, verse 42. So we're going to try to see now what some characteristics of the Brahmana are. So we specifically see in 1842, it says here, Brahmanas are peacefulness, self-control, austerity, purity, tolerance, honesty, knowledge, wisdom, and religiousness. They are all natural qualities by which the Brahmanas work. Now, if we look at the Rig Veda, it actually takes the four Varnas, and it actually it makes an analogy to the Lord's actual body, and it describes that the Varnas represent the head. The Rig Veda describes that the Brahmanas represent the head of the Lord's body, and that essentially is very very analogous to actually what they do in day-to-day life. They're literally the brains of society, right? And so in modern day, what does a Brahmana actually look like? So I'm going to just name off some specific careers that a Brahmana might do. Brahmanas are involved in research. They could be teachers. They are professors. They are academics. They may be writers or journalists. Specifically, Brahmanas that raise funds for specifically societal purposes or for charity. They are also considered the work of Brahmanas. And spiritual leaders. Spiritual leaders are the Brahmanas. And typically they're very much, they have a thirst for knowledge. They're going to be ones who really, really like to go deep and study things at a very deep level. But once they've studied something, they have this they have a desire to share what they've learned, to help others. So because they tend to, again, share what they know, they tend to be those that are imparting knowledge and are teaching society. And again, as we mentioned, these qualities here, the Bhagavad Gita specifically talks about the specific qualities that a Brahmana imbibe. And so one can actually go within themselves to introspect a little bit and say, do these things come naturally to me, right? And that's a way of actually, doing kind of a litmus test to see, do these kind of resonate with me or not? The second varna, or the nature that the Vedas describe, is the Kshatriya. Now the Kshatriya, they're considered to be the administrative class of men, or specifically they're martial. So they actually are those that are taking the ideas that are given by the thought leaders and the thinkers and the teachers, and they are actually implementing them. So they're the ones who are executing. Not only do they execute, they're resourceful. They're the ones that are actually upholding the laws and the principles of society. And so they're guided by morality and ethics. And thirdly, they're ones that are actually giving protection to society. So if we specifically go to the next verse, 1843, it says, heroism, power, determination, resourcefulness, courage in battle, generosity, and leadership are the natural qualities of work for the Kshatriyas. So again, the Kshatriyas, when we go back to looking at the body, they represent the arms of the Lord, which is fitting for them because they're actually working, they're actually implementing and working. And in the modern day, what does that look like? So there could be a variety of roles by which the Kshatriya fits. because they could be anyone from the politician to the government administrator. They could be one who is they could be teaching in the martial field. So for example, military, police officers, these are all considered Kshatriyas in society. People who are managing or overseeing the administration of resources, and even those that are actually offering large-scale services. So remember, the Kshatriya, the way they are actually really bound to fairness, rules, ethics. They generally want to make people happy, so they're generally they have a heroic side to them. They're courageous. They want to naturally protect people, but because we know that all the modes of material nature, they're actually more in the mode of passion. So they may be people who tend to be people who could be a little bit edgy. They could get angered very easily. They could they perhaps like a good fight. So these are because they like to take charge. So Kshatriyas are very goal oriented. They're very decisive, and they are determined. So they're not going to be the people that give up very easily. And I can very much looking at the different varnas relate to this. One of the activities that I started at a very young age that I don't tell most devotees, and I'll share today for the first time, is that since the age of 7, I've been involved in martial arts, specifically Kung Fu. So I've been doing it now for over 30 years. And for me, it very much, I used to sit at home when I was little, and I used to watch martial art movies, Kung Fu movies, and I just looked at the screen and said, I wanted to do that. So my parents were happy enough to enroll me when I was little, and it really has become part of me because it really, to me, I'm very much a person that needs equity and fairness. And one of the great ways you can actually differentiate the Brahmin or the thinker, the intellectual versus the Kshatriya, the administrator, the warrior, is because the Brahmin, they tend to be quite they tend to be quite internally peaceful. They're able to sacrifice. One easy way to do it is that if you ask a Brahmana to do something, and maybe it's not a fair situation, they'll go ahead and do it. But the warrior or the administrator, the Kshatriya, if you ask them to do something that is not fair or just, they will not be able to do it. So this is a really easy question to ask ourselves when we're looking and trying to differentiate two different people. Or even for yourself, how to try to kind of differentiate between the two. So the third class of or division is considered the Vaishyas, and specifically the modern day businessman. So their role specifically in society is they're there to earn and actually provide and develop resources. They're the ones who expand wealth, and they work for profit, right? So specifically, they are the ones that actually support the administrators, warriors, and thinkers or intellectual members of society, the spiritual members of society, through the resources that they're able to garner. And now specifically, if we look at 1844, it specifically says here, farming, cow protection, and business are the natural work of Vaishyas, right? And for Sudras, which is the fourth class, they are labors and service to others. So the ones who are the Vaishyas, they're really considered to be them. They're really after resources. They will deal with land. Again, because they could be farmers, they deal with animals. They are generally very inclined to dealing with money, and they always have an inclination to expand. So they'll, take $1 and make it $10, right? They're always thinking of how we can grow things. But with the Vaishya, a good way to identify the Vaishya compared to a Kshatriya and a Brahmana will take as little as they need, and they'll give the rest of what they have away in charity. The Vaishya specifically takes everything they need for themselves to be comfortable. Then once they are comfortable, they're out there in the world to try to help people. And so therefore, they're always looking to see how can things be sustainable, right? How can things things expand in the long term? Specifically in the context of the body, the Rig Veda describes that the Lord's trunk and belly is what is represented by the Vaishyas. So if we think of an analogy, they actually take raw materials. So think about it. They take, if the belly takes food and assimilates it, the Vaishyas, they deal with raw materials and they will make something out of it. So they will deal with the raw materials of society and make something. So the idea may come from a Brahmana, but they're going to be the ones that actually make something that it can be actually practically used by society. And so in the modern day, they could be people in finance, they're going to be bankers, they're essentially people who develop wealth, but they can also be those that actually are farmers in society. Generally, back in the Vedic system, the Vaishyas were the ones that actually they maintained cows specifically. Cows were the main mode of sustenance and growth for everything the cow provided. So the Vaishyas were those that actually were the cow herds. So specifically, if we know that Krishna, he was born into a family of Vaishyas. So Nanda Maharaj is actually a Vaishya, and he had thousands and thousands of cows that Krishna assisted in taking care of. Now, finally, the fourth class that we wanted to finally describe are the Sudras, and specifically the Sudras are the craftsmen, the artists, and the labor class of society. So they're really the manpower, and the role the Sudras are so important for society, because they actually provide society with creative inspiration. They provide society self-expression and how society can express themselves. They are the ones that create beauty and they create function in society. So many people may see, but not only that, the Shudras or they're the labor class people. So many people in society, we need people to implement different things. So if you have someone who wants to build something, the builders, the people who are doing all the trades, they're the people actually providing the labor for the building to actually go up. So they actually support. They're always in the mood and in the mindset of supporting the other levels of the other classes of society. So they're always wanting to support, right? And but they're really important in actually accomplishing and getting things done, because they're doing the hands-on work. And in the Vedic context, on the Lord's body, this is described as the legs and the feet of the Lord. So as mentioned, they are going to be, maybe if people can relate to the nature of having a Shuddha, they like to use their hands to make something. So they'll say, I made that, or I did that, or I enjoy using tools, or I like seeing people use something that I've made, or they're ones that actually, they're very authentic. They're characterized by authenticity, by honesty, and because they tend to be, for example, in modern day, they'll be seen as those that are the artists, the musicians, For example, they will be the others that are actually, as we mentioned, the labor workers, but they have a strong sense of being self-satisfied with the work that they do. So and because of that, they're not always going to be necessarily the most ambitious people, but they can be. But they are, because they inherently have that self-satisfaction with what they're doing. So again, like we talked about musicians and craftsmen, but also actors, they're also in the Shudra quality. The people, again, we mentioned in the trades. And again, as it mentions here, Shudras, there are the labor and service to others. So those are in general the 4 divisions or the 4 varnas. And so maybe even already people have thought about which one they may apply to them. We're going to get into more now specific questions. But before we get into that, I just wanted to see and take the opportunity to see, are there any questions from our audience? To see if there's any questions at this point, we can go ahead and take some questions. You can just see if there's anybody making any questions.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a question here. Okay, so the first question is, what if you notice you have qualities from 2 varnas? How do you maneuver through that, and how do you identify which varna is more prominent? So this is a great question from Malvika. Thank you so much. And this is a really good point, because one thing that people have to understand, and I was going to get to this point, is that in today's age that we're in, the Vedic texts they talk about, the yoga texts they talk about, we're in the age of Kali. So it's characterized by an age of chaos, by an age of confusion, by an age of crossbreeding, overlapping, and mixing. So it's actually, first of all, know that it's actually very normal to have features of 2 different varnas, maybe even a third. There is, and a lot of it comes from the fact that a lot of times we haven't given enough thought to maybe what our inherent strengths and qualities are. A lot of it times it comes from because there's societal pressures that are pushing us to do something, but actually we wanted to do, our nature is to do something totally different. And so what happens is that led to our psychophysical nature not matching our occupation or what we're actually maybe even studying. Now, and again, there could be a variety of reasons for that. Many of our younger generation of devotees and practitioners, they may find that there's a lot of parental pressure. There's attachment to what society thinks is valuable. And as I'm sure you've seen, but if we look at today's society in the broad context, the people that are the Vaishyas, those that are earning money, those that are who have some sort of prestige or fame, they're actually the ones that are considered the most quote unquote successful in society. So there's perhaps even a pressure to go in that direction. And unfortunately, in today's society, there's a big element that's there, and it even could be even coming from our own parents, is that there's a level of non-acceptance, right? And so what I'm hoping today, after today's session, is that that's why honesty is such a big part of actually identifying our varnas, because we have to actually be honest with ourselves, and there's going to be certain things that we actually have to accept for ourselves. Now, just going back to the question, how you can specifically, how you can maneuver both, knowing which varna is more prominent, we're actually going to get into specific questions that we can specifically look at, that hopefully will tease out the 2. But as we get into these questions, it's really important. There's a couple things that are really important. First, as we're trying to understand ourselves, that we have some sort of spiritual practice. When we have a daily spiritual practice, especially chanting, specifically a specific sadhana or chanting of the Maha Mantra, when we have this practice, what's actually described is it's called, what it does is Cheto Darpana Marjam. It actually removes the dust that is actually clouding us. So in this process, when we actually have a daily practice or sadhana, we actually start to understand ourselves better. So it's really important to have, like, as we kind of try to decipher the do, to have that daily practice. Then secondly is to have a mentor, specifically a mentor who may be further along on the path than us, who and then also someone who may know us well. So by chance, if that's not a mentor, we'll be asking you some questions that a lot of the ideal people to help you answer some of these questions will be your parents. So parents can actually serve as good mentors because they've known you over a period of time, and they're going to be able to tell you a lot of the things that you're going to know about yourself now. You've actually shown those behaviors as a child and as a young child. So we're actually going to go back and have you reflect on things you used to do when you were a kid. And finally, it will involve some introspection for yourself. So those are going to be some practical things that I can just mention now of how you're going to be able to determine which one's more prominent. But when we get to the question specifically, hopefully things will become a little bit more clear. But again, like I said, it's the age of Kali that we're in. It's natural to have an overlapping, but there's always going to be one Varna that's predominant. Now, even if we, and again, once you know that predominant, usually that secondary Varna, or the Varna that we have, the nature that we see features of, a lot of times it's going to be impacted by our environment, the type of parents we have, what kind of perhaps people we're surrounding ourselves around day to day. So our environment and our background, our family backgrounds really have an impact on that kind of mixing of that or that secondary nature that we see coming through. So just keep those in mind. So we just have a second question that I'll take before moving on. Oh, this is great. Someone actually brought up another verse that we were going to look at. Is if everyone wants to flip to chapter 14, text 13. This question is from Harsha, thank you very much. And it's asking in 4:13, Krishna says, Chatur Varnyam Mahasristam. So the question is, so he has created the caste system. Why do we reject the caste system by birth? So this is an excellent question. So actually, this whole system of Varna, it was well established in the tradition of in the Vedic system. It's actually well established that this system of Varna is actually supposed to be based on our behavior or characteristics rather than our birthright. So what that means, and this was actually very much established by our one of the gurus in our line, Bhaktisiddhanta. So Swami Prabhupada's guru, Bhaktisiddhanta, at a very young age, he actually established this through his writings. There's a very famous story that Bhaktisiddhanta's guru, Bhaktivinoda, there was a time where there was an open assembly, and the discussion specifically at this assembly was, is a Brahmana or the priestly or spiritual order of society, is it based on birth or is it based on quality? And at that time, Bhaktivinoda was supposed to go speak on this topic, and he became very sick. He became very, very sick. So he prayed actually to Krishna that please send someone. And his son, who was a great scholar, Bhaktisiddhanta, came to him and presented an essay that he had just written on this topic. And Bhaktivinoda said, you are actually the most qualified person to go speak. And so it's understood that actually, if one is born into, let's say, quote unquote, a Brahmana family, but they actually exemplify the qualities of a Kshatriya, a Vaishya, or a Shudra, that they should actually be nurtured, and they should be nurtured in that way if they behave or are exemplifying qualities as such. But if someone is born, for example, in a Shudra family, in a family of artists, tradesmen, but they're actually exemplifying the qualities of austerity, truthfulness, honesty, purity of a Brahmana, or they're exemplifying martial qualities of protection, of morality, then they should actually be cultivated and they should be prompted to actually live a life that's actually catered to that, and it's actually not based on birth. And this is where actually the whole confusion lies, is that although Krishna designed this system, this is actually Krishna's system, and that's actually why it works so well. But it works under the premise that actually everybody is important. Everyone actually has inherent value and importance in society. And the reason why it's been misrepresented, and this is why in this story, Bhaktisiddhanta, he actually went to this assembly of Brahmanas to discuss specifically this is the Brahmana based on birth or by behavior. And what happened actually at this assembly is he started providing all these different arguments from the Vedic text, from scripture, of why the Brahmana is actually based on one's activity, how they carry themselves, one's behavior, so the qualities that they imbibe, and the culture, the environment by which they surround themselves in. So simply put, the ABCs of a Brahmana are activity, behavior, and culture. So if we understand this, and the reason why he did this was because at that time, the Brahmanas had they had a monopoly on spirituality, and they had told the other class society that actually we are the knowledge of spirituality, of yoga is actually meant. We're actually supposed to be the only ones, and so they did this to embellish and empower themselves and to suppress others, right? And so this is actually what Bhaktisiddhanta actually went to. Actually, this is the misinterpretation, misnomer that he went to break. And when he actually, this story is so famous that when Bhaktisiddhanta, at the end of his time, he was only allowed to speak on the last day, because initially when he went up to speak, he actually was very much, he was actually booed. He was booed by the other Brahmanas who were there. They actually were heckling him because they actually knew that what he was saying was the truth, and they were actually exposed. If we let him continue to speak, he's going to expose us. He's going to expose us for what we're actually, for what we actually are. And so the reason why at the end of that gathering, he had conclusively established that the specifically the Brahmana, but this Varna system is actually based on one's qualities and characteristics rather than one birth. And this is actually that uplifted all the thousands and thousands of people that actually went to this discussion. Why? Because for the first time, they actually realized that they themselves have an opportunity to pursue the spirituality, to pursue, to gain knowledge and wisdom, to pursue their inherent relationship with divine, with Krishna. And what happened? It's such an amazing story that when this happened, actually all the other Brahmanas that were actually at that assembly, they actually left. They left because they knew that they were exposed. And what happened was there was actually a riot that occurred in this assembly. All the people, the thousands of people, they actually all rushed the stage because they actually wanted to touch the feet of Bhaktisiddhanta. And Bhaktisiddhanta, he was such a strict Brahmin. He was so pure and he was so detached. He never let anybody touch his feet. So the policeman, they actually said that if you do not let these people, if you do not actually fulfill what these people want, there's going to be a huge uproar and riot. So what they actually did was they actually took his feet and they put it in like a huge bucket. They put it in a small bucket of water, and what they did was that small bucket of water they actually tossed into a huge barrel of water. And then what they did was they took a hose and they sprayed the entire assembly of people with that water, which is considered charnamrit, or sanctified water, because they had that water had touched his feet. And everybody was so grateful and excited because they got the mercy and the blessings of Bhaktisiddhanta in this way. So again, I know it's a little bit of a longer answer, but that story is such a tremendous story that exemplifies the importance of where in our lineage this was actually established, that the caste system is one that's based actually on our inherent qualities in nature rather than our birth. So just moving forward, we'll take more questions later on, but where we're going to be going from here is, now that we've described the 4 varnas, we're actually going to try to figure out now, okay, how do we actually try to determine where we fit? And so before we do, what's our inherent, so there's 2 questions that we have to ask ourselves that's going to help us hopefully better determine maybe what career or way of life we were doing. The first question is, what's our inherent disposition or nature? And some of the qualities that I had asked are provided to you. But the key questions to ask for the one who is looking to, if they're wondering if a Brahmana will always ask themselves 2 questions. Is it true and is it wise? So these are 2 of the questions that the thinkers, the intellectual leaders of society will ask themselves. So those are the 2 key questions that you can pose to yourself for the Brahmins of society. The Kshatriyas, or those that are the administrators or government officials or warriors, the 2 key questions they're asking themselves is it fair and is it honorable? So they'll always ask these questions first before acting, right? That's a big, those are 2 important questions that they will continuously reflect on, because these values are really important to them. For those that are in the field or the inherent nature of resources, or those of like the business class or the Vaishyas, the 2 questions they will ask themselves is it sustainable? So can it keep growing? And is it regenerative, right? So is it something that can sustain itself over the long term? And finally, for the 4th class or division, the artists, the craftsmen, the labor class of society, the 2 very important questions they ask themselves is it beautiful and is it supportive? So they will specifically want to do activities that can actually support others, or that other people can make use of something that they've actually created. So and again, you may find that both you may resonate with questions from different categories, and that's fine. So for example, if the Shudra, which is going to be the majority or the labor class of society, if let's say they're asking themselves those 2 questions, but also if they ask themselves if they do something, is it fair or honorable? If they're asking themselves those questions, they are actually the people that should be supporting the Kshatriyas or the administrative class of society, because that's their inherent. That's what they're good at. They're good at supporting. So if morality, if they have questions of morality within them, then we actually know that they should actually be supporting that specific group of people in society. So it's not like, okay, you're only fixed to 2. You may be asking questions in the other divisions, no problem. But then it also will give you an idea of what that maybe either the secondary is. And then the second big question, after we've kind of looked at our disposition and after we've looked at our inherent nature, the other important question that we must ask ourselves is, what type of wealth am I attracted to? So this is not something that we actually think about so much, but the Vedic text and the texts of the Bhakti, they actually talk about 6 types of wealth, right? And so maybe if people have heard of these types of the different types of wealth, please start to name them off. But we're going to just quickly go through all 6. The first type of wealth is Shri, or beauty. So one can enjoy wealth in the form of beauty, and it's not just physical beauty, beauty in the form of environment, in the form of music, in the form of having charismatic, being charismatic or charismatic speaking or leadership. So they have their wealth or their prosperity is that they enjoy beauty, or they're attracted to beauty, things, aesthetics, right? So that's referring to Shri. That's a form of wealth or prosperity. The second type of wealth that's really important to consider is virya. So virya refers to strength, but not only strength in the physical domain, but specifically mental strength. So they're the ones. They imbibe people who enjoy virya or have the opulence of virya. They tend to be ones who are courageous. They're usually going to be ones that really appreciate their health or someone else's health, and perhaps they're going to be involved in some sort of health industry. But their wealth and what they enjoy is specifically physical and mental strength. In the Shastras, it also refers to sexual strength. So specifically those that actually have many children. That's actually also someone who has many children is considered to be have much virya or sexual strength. The third form of wealth that's important to consider is jnana, or knowledge. So there are many people that love accumulating, and they're just always attracted to accumulating knowledge or information. They're reading, they're studying, they love to always upgrade themselves and wanting to upgrade their knowledge, right? So that's the third type of wealth or prosperity. The fourth type of prosperity or wealth is yasha. So yasha is very interesting, actually. Yasha refers to the honor and glory that one receives because they have followed principles of dharma. So a lot of people who may be practicing bhakti specifically, they could actually, they may even know people who, let's say people on the outside world, they see that, hey, you wake up early in the morning every day, you have a spiritual practice, you restrain yourself from from alcohol, from meat, and you don't gamble. So they actually, because they're following principle of dharma, people actually can, maybe you'll get complimented. You will be praised for actually having, for following the principles of dharma. And that actual honor or glory, that's a form of wealth or prosperity. Because Yasha, who is Yasha in the Srimad Bhagavatam? Yasha is actually the child of Kirti and Dharma, right? And so it represents, so Yasha also represents the wealth of a community, right? So this is actually also a form of wealth. So do we have an inclination or an attraction to Yasha? Then the fifth form of wealth is vairagya. So vairagya specifically refers to renunciation or detachment. Literally, vairagya means without passion. So the interesting thing about vairagya, like the other forms of wealth or prosperity, vairagya can't actually be taken away by someone else, right? Other things can actually wither or degrade or decrease, but specifically vairagya, because they're based on a detachment, that's why qualities such as forgiveness, humility, compassion, simplicity, and freedom, these are all actually qualities, these are all actually wealth. So many people that we meet, they're immersed in our day-to-day activities, they're Vaishyas, but actually all they want is perhaps just a simple, peaceful life where they don't have so many responsibilities and obligations and attachments to certain material things. And so they're actually aspiring for more detachment. But only a certain group of people actually are A, attracted to enough to it, and B, willing to change their life in a way to actually to imbibe and cultivate vairagya. So this is also a form of wealth. And then the last form of wealth is Aishwarya. So Aishwarya comes from the word Ishvara. So specifically this wealth of controlling and having power, right? Now, I would say that most people who are Vaishyas, their wealth is actually what? It's actually finances, it's money, right? Because it will bestow a certain amount of control or power that one can have with money. So the reason why I went over these 6 types of wealth is that wealth is not just one dimension. We usually think of wealth in today's society as just monetary, right? We just describe many other types of wealth that are all very powerful, all very satisfying, and not each of those things are going to attract us to different degrees. So once we actually have identified, our inherent nature or just our inherent nature or varna, and we combine that with what type of wealth we're attracted to, then once we have those 2 things, we'll be able to specifically zero in on perhaps a potential way of life or career that might attract us. So for example, someone who is a Vaishya or attracted to resources, but is really attracted to the wealth of virya or strength. They may be someone who, goes out there and makes a certain type of health product. They may be someone who has a chain of yoga studios or gyms, right? Because they really are they're attracted to good health and strength, but they also have this inclination, this Vaishya inclination to increase resources, to expand. So again, it's just trying to show one simple example of how when you take these 2 inclinations, then you're able to come up with something more specific. So those are some. So those are again describing the forms of wealth. And now what we're gonna do is I talked to you about some specific questions that you can ask yourself. Now we're gonna take a step back and just talk about broader questions, just to help us identify potentially what varna. If we have no idea, then we can specifically identify what varna we'd be in. So here's some key questions that you can write down and think about. Now you may not know the answers to these right away, and that's okay. But here's some key questions to take out for yourselves. And again, these are all under the premise that if we have a spiritual practice, if we have some mentors or guides or even well-wishing parents to help us, navigate these questions. So the first question I'll put out to everyone is, how do you spend your free time? So the different choices may be. So one is, do you spend your free time educating yourself or acquiring knowledge? So that's the first option. Second is, do you have a tendency to want to just have fun, or do you get bored very easily? Do you spend your free time either investing money, looking to maximize profit or productivity, or do you involve yourself in competition, contest, or just high competitive pursuits? So perhaps maybe some of you have already been able to put together which varna or specifically constitution, nature that those are equated to. But though if you identify with education or acquiring knowledge, that's usually more of the intellectual, teacher, or Brahminical nature. One who's having fun or has tendency to get bored very easily. That's specifically those who are in the Shudra, labor class, artistic area of life. The ones who are making investing profit, that's pretty clear. Those are the Vaishyas or the wealth managers. And then the last one, specifically those who are very competitive and very goal-oriented, they tend to be the Kshatriyas. So that's the first question. The second, again, broad question is, how do you utilize money? So now we're specifically referring to actual monetary funds. So the first option would be, would you invest in business projects and then distribute the rest to society? Would you keep just what is needed to function and then distribute the rest to society? Would you save very little bit and spend the rest, or would you have a tendency to spend all of it, right? Or the fourth option is, the first option is, do you keep what you need to maintain a family, and then do you then distribute the rest to charity? So again, the first option we mentioned: do you invest in business or projects and distribute society? Those are the Kshatriyas. Do you keep just what you need and distribute then to the rest in charity? Those are the Brahmanas, the intellectuals. Do you save a little or spend all of it? Those tend to be the Shudras, the labor class. And then finally, do you keep what you need just for maintenance of a family and then distribute the rest in charity? Again, Kshatriyas. Now these are, again, there are much more specific things. We're just asking very broad questions so that people can get a better idea. So the third question now is, how do you like to work? So the first option is, do you like to work with money and people, right? The second option is, do you like to work with people, and do you like to do more subtle activities such as thinking, speaking, writing? The third option is, do you like to work with material objects? Do you like to work with money? Do you like to work with animals? And then the fourth option is, do you like producing things? Do you like working with your hands? Do you like the arts or creativity? So again, just for clarity's sake, those who like to work with money and people, they will tend to be the Kshatriyas, because not only do they govern resources, but they actually, for the Kshatriya, influence and power is very important. So they will also be guiding and overseeing groups of people. So those that tend to work with people and subtler activities, for example, is thinking, speaking, writing, those tend to be Brahmanas. So they also will work with people, but they tend to be those that are, for example, the academics who the government people will bring in to consult on a specific policy. So the government will want to implement something, but they'll go to the academics, they'll go to the scholars, they'll go to the intellectual class to seek advice. So those are the Brahmanas. So they still also need to work with people because they're casting a vision to guide society. Then the third, those that like to work with animal, material objects, and money, those are the Vaishyas. So the animals specifically refer to the farmers of society. And again, those that are looking to produce objects and work with specifically money. And then the last thing, using your hands, creating something, being artistic, that revolves specifically around the artistic, craftsmen, and labor class of society. And then the fourth specific question that we will get into is, this is now the fourth question specifically has to do with spiritual activities. And even in our day-to-day life, specifically in the practice of bhakti, there's so many different types of services and sevas that we can actually engage in, but we all have some sort of tendency or inclination towards a specific activity. So with our spiritual activities, what are we inclined towards? Do we like to, the first option is hard work, and do we like to work really hard and then do what is fun for ourselves? Do we do we like services that involve monitoring, checking? Are we very disciplined? Are we interested in systematics and overall structure? The third option is, are we trying to detach from results? Are we very strict in our practice? Or is what we're doing steeped in philosophy or knowledge? And then the fourth option is, are we really inclined towards practical results of what an activity gives us? So we're always looking at the practical benefit. And so the first option, those that work hard and are very much interested in just doing what is fun, those are going to be the labor class and the Shudras. The second is specifically those that are interested in monitoring, checking, who are interested in discipline and overseeing and protecting. Those are the Kshatriyas. The third, those that are detaching, very strict about their practice, and always trying to consult the Shastric text, the Vedic text, always wanting to do something based on knowledge. that's the Brahmana. And again, as we mentioned, the Brahmana is going to do something because it's the right thing to do, not necessarily because it's fair or just. And then the fourth thing, practical results, practical benefits. This tends to be the work, the tendency of the Vaishya. So those again were just some very large, some kind of big lens questions that you can ask yourselves when you're trying to categorize yourself. And now you may find that 3 might be one category and 1 might be one. So what I would say in that situation is that if you were Brahmana for all 3, but then there was one that you were actually Vaishya or Shudra, that you would actually have a predominance of one, but then you also have a flare or an angle of another, right? And so I'll give you an example for myself. When I was just recently, we were organizing a retreat for Kirtan Toronto, and one of the people, a wonderful devotee who actually is our who helps us, one of the organizers, she actually only wanted to charge $20 for the whole day event, and she wanted to give prasad, she wanted to give 3 meals and have all these different activities. And to me, I thought to myself, this is not going to be sustainable. We're gonna definitely lose out on this. And so I went back to them, and I said that we're gonna run a loss. We're for sure gonna lose money. So we raised the price a little bit, and the result was we obviously made a little bit more. We definitely were in the minus, and that's fine. But to me, it kind of spoke to my inherent nature, which is predominantly Kshatriya, but because again my family grew up in a family of Vaishyas that were really business minded, business oriented, there's for me, I have also a strong sense of practicality. So definitely while there is a predominance of Kshatriya, there's a strong Vaishya aspect or you could say flair that is also governing and helping me make decisions in life, and that affect me. So again, the important thing that I want everyone to take away after we've looked at all the varnas is, first of all, the hierarchy that you see, if what is actually understood as a hierarchy, that hierarchy is actually the reason why there's a hierarchy from Brahmana to Shudra. Is specifically, it was in the context of intelligence and knowledge. So that was actually the barometer by which the hierarchy was based on, because, and specifically the intellectual class or the Brahmanas, the reason why they are considered the most intelligent is because that intelligence is actually used for the benefit of society, right? So one actually has to understand that if one can accept that we all have different levels of intellectual ability, then we'll happily accept where we're at. But that we know that if we want certain designations, it also comes with certain inherent, not only natures, but it comes with certain inherent responsibilities as well, right? So that the Brahmanas, because they were given certain level of respect and honor for their level of intelligence, that intelligence is specifically used to maximize benefit of the society. So it's there to maximize specifically the potential and the happiness of the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, and the Shudras. And again, like we look at the analogy of the body, the head, the arms, the legs, no two functions two different parts of the body can do the same work, right? The legs cannot do what the arms can do, and the arms cannot do what the head can do. So we should actually see that actually everyone's inherent role as unique, as special, as worthy, and as special, right? That's really what I want us to take out of it. If you remember, again, this is obviously in a very specific context, but if you remember the story of Lord Ram, when he was building the bridge across Lanka, right? Hanuman is this extremely strong warrior, and he's carrying boulders to help form this bridge. And then we see in this story, there's an ant, and this ant, all the ant is able to do is push this grain of sand, right? And what happens is that Hanuman, he actually criticizes the ant, says, get out of my way. Look at what you're doing compared to me, right? And Lord Ram, he actually admonishes and he chastises Hanuman. What does he say? He says that actually both of you are doing the exact same work. I see no difference between either of you, because based on your capacity and based on your abilities, you are doing the best of your ability, right? So we see again here that actually the Lord sees us as equal, and we should accept the gifts that have been given to us, but as best possible. And this is a really hard thing in the day and age that we live in, specifically in this age of Kali, is this mindset of comparison. This mindset of comparison really can deter us from actually being happy and to fulfill our greatest potential, right? And so this is a message that I want to send out to everyone, is that if we can actually appreciate more and compare less, we're all going to be doing better, because not only then are we going to have improved relationships by accepting people for who they are, but we're also going to have less expectations of people who have perhaps a different nature or mindset or vision by which they look at the world. Because what happens is it's understood that many of you probably heard that the root of all our difficulties and our troubles and our disappointments in life is because there's unmet expectations. So there's again a little bit more information. If there's any questions at this point, we'll take some more questions. I have some more pertinent questions that we can that I'll share with you. But right now, I'll just see right now if there's any more questions from anybody in our audience tuning in. So I just wanted to see, is there anybody that has any specific questions? This is the opportunity. If there's anything burning that you have to ask, please let us know. Feel free to write in the comment section if you have any specific questions, and if not, that's okay. All right. So then a couple more questions that I'm gonna leave you with, specifically that you can take away with yourselves. And again, these questions are there really for our own introspection and self-exploration, and I find that these questions really help us identify our specific strengths because we should always, a lot of us are trying to live our lives, but we're not actually approaching life from a position of strength, right? So I want everyone to ask themselves these questions so they can honestly try to inherently identify their strengths and qualities. So one of the questions that we can ask ourselves is, on top of the questions we already asked ourselves, is, but what naturally were we good at when we were young? Specifically when we were young. So that if you're having a hard time thinking about what that might be, what did people naturally always appreciate about you? Or what can you more easily do yourself than other people can? So that's another way of asking yourself the same question, is what you do more easily than others, right? And then the flip side to that same question is, what do you like doing that others actually don't like doing? Because once you've actually, a lot of people find a niche for themselves because they've realized, hey, I actually not only like doing this, I'm good at this, but no one else can stand this. So for example, my work as a doctor, I'll even get other doctors that say, I could not work with kids, or I could not deal with parents. And for me, that's actually something that not only do I find like fairly easy, but it's something that I enjoy to do, and it comes naturally, right? So again, looking at what maybe other people don't like to do that you like to do, that's also another way of identifying your certain strengths. Another question to ask yourself then, specifically in the same context, is what is something that you did as a young child that was almost something that you had a hard time, that was irrepressible. So the way you can think about that is, what did you do that you didn't even know that you were doing, right? So another way to think about this is, some people may have complained when you were, like people may complain now or when you were young, that perhaps you had a tendency to get involved and you needed to teach people things. Or maybe you had a tendency to always clean, or maybe you had a tendency to always want to support people in a certain way. Or maybe you always needed to manage things in a certain way, and you needed to have a certain sense of control of things and of managing other people. So again, certain activities or certain qualities about yourself that actually just you did it without even think about it. That's actually also another way for you to identify your strengths, and specifically the qualities that are unique to yourself, so your own personality. Another question that we can specifically ask ourselves is, one of the things is, what do you have fun doing, or something that's or something that excited you, specifically again when you were young? Because we find that a lot of the times we might be doing something now, but we might be disconnected from the things that we were inherently good at or we actually had fun doing. And I always think of going back to when we were young children as a good way to actually get a real sense of when we were more uninhibited and didn't have so many societal pressures to kind of push us in a certain way. We just did what we did because it was fun, it was easy, and we liked to do it. So think about things that were fun and exciting when you were young. And then the last question that I'll just put forward to help us, because also when we're in circles of other practitioners, in spiritual circles, even in devotees, is we tend to have certain strengths and qualities, but we don't necessarily, we know them, but we don't necessarily tell other people about them because we might be shy, because we don't want to come across with a certain image, because we don't want to attract so much attention. So one of the things that I'll ask, that I'll tell you to consider is, what are some of the hidden strengths that you have that actually not too many people know about, right? So consider this question as actually a really good way to identify something that might be just particular or very more unique to yourself. Because a lot of times we have a lot of inherent strengths and qualities that we actually know within ourselves, but we don't want to bring too much attention to. But really go inside and ask yourself this question, because you'll actually get a lot of tremendous information from that specific type of question. So again, I'll just take another opportunity to ask specific questions. If there are any specific questions that have come forward. Let's see. Anybody in the comment box? Are Calgary following any specific questions? All right. It looks like there doesn't seem to be any other questions coming through. Okay. So on that note, we will conclude. Now, again, if anyone has any specific questions after that they've gone through this, after they've gone through the questions, if you want a little bit more help trying to sort things out, I'm happy to be available through email. If you leave comments on this after, I'll try to check the questions. For those people that are in Calgary and on the West Coast, specifically contact Aditya, and he has a way of putting you in touch with me. If there's other people from around other places in the world, please either put your question in the comment box, or I will also just leave my email to make it available. And
There's a question.
oh, it looks like there is a question that has come through. Okay, so we'll try to address this question before we wrap up.
From Gupta.
Sorry?
Last name is Gupta.
Okay, what is the, hold on, I'm trying to refresh and get the question back here.
What should one do if they start to realize they have a different Dharma? Can you read it?
For some reason, mine is kind of So what is the question?
There's two of them. Could you please summarize all of the questions and associated options just to ensure we haven't missed any?
The associated questions and the options. Okay, so just going through the key questions, what I'll do is I'll go through the key questions, and then to the different options, what I'll do is I'll actually put it in the comment box as actually a note, so you can actually come back to it. So the first question is, how do you spend your free time? The second question is, how would you utilize money? The third big question is, how do you like to work? And then the fourth question is, which spiritual activities are you inclined towards? So those are the four questions. Now the specific options, what we'll do is I'll actually put them actually in the message box so you can actually see the different choices attached to them. So those are the four big questions. The specific questions to the specific varnas, what you may ask yourself, I'll also put in the message box as well. And then the second question is?
What should one
All
do?
right, so that's a really good question. So the question is, what should one do if they start to realize that they have a different varna late in their life? So that's a really important question. Now I'm assuming that this varna is specifically in relation to their work, that they're, perhaps probably like the work that they're doing. So that is, there's definitely not a clear answer to this, but I think first of all, I think the first really important thing is to a certain level of acceptance within oneself, to acknowledge that they have certain qualities that they may not be cultivating, because actually this is what happens in this age of Kali that we're in, is that people have certain qualities and certain tendencies, but to actually grow into our potential, they need to be cultivated. They need to actually be nurtured and fostered, right? So I think first of all, if there are any specific activities that you think would actually foster and nurture your specific varna, I would say go ahead and start to make time immediately to do that, because you will notice right away that you will feel more happy. The second thing I would definitely suggest is, if you have guides or mentors or specifically people that you trust and that know you well, they can also help you to specifically give you specific advice in your specific context and situation around what might be best for you to move forward. That might even involve shifting a career, which I definitely can say is I understand that some of this information that people might have understood could be very confronting, because they learn things about themselves that they didn't know, and they have a need now to make a shift. So I will definitely say, when it comes in the context of perhaps even switching career, that it's definitely should be done with some guidance, with some wisdom, with actually also being practical, because we know that the age and the society that we live in today, not only are there the principles that we'd be striving for, but there's also that element of practicality. So I'm not suggesting that you have to give everything up you're doing right now and make a switch. But gradually what people would do was maybe they start pursuing what they really enjoy doing on the side and trying to grow that, so eventually it could take over what they're doing. So on a very practical level. And even for myself, while I practice day-to-day as a doctor, there's a lot of things that I do through my yoga and my spiritual practice and learning that I am actually trying to cultivate. Also things that tend to be a little bit more Brahminical in nature that I like to do, but again, trying to cultivate those on the side that eventually maybe they could be a part of, a greater part of my day-to-day life. But again, the point is that there are practical considerations to be made, and the really important thing is that if you're able to, first of all, to accept within yourselves, have others around you also understand, the people that are closest to you, that you have certain inherent qualities, needs, and natures, to also be accepting, then to give yourself a little bit of, be compassionate yourself, give yourself some time to invest in these specific areas that could be of interest to you, and not only of interest to you, that you are good at. And then also making sure that you have guides and mentors to help you navigate the more practical aspects of it. So that's my answer, my short answer to that question. Are there any other specific questions that have come up?
No.
All right. So on that note, I would like to thank everyone tremendously for giving their time and attention during this Facebook Live event. Again, the topic was discussing our, specifically from the Vedic perspective, our varnas, or our identities, to help us really understand our strengths, our personalities, but to be able to make decisions not only about potentially what area of life we should be investing our time in terms of a career, but also to improve our relationships by understanding ourselves and others, so we can ultimately be more confident in our day-to-day life and more resolved in our spiritual practice and our pursuit of Bhakti Yoga. So I hope everyone got something practical out of today. Again, if people have any questions, please continue to dialogue through the message box, and we will see you at our next event. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.